right, welcome back. How's everybody doing? Oh yeah? Sounds wonderful. How was the exam? Everybody got it completed? Who hasn't got it in? Everybody got their exams in? What'd you think? Not too difficult, right? Should we switch it up to like the exam format? All right. I noticed that there was no way to submit journal 1 and 2, so I changed that. So now you have to upload a file. So as soon as you can, try to get in at least journal 1. We're past the midway point, so we're halfway through, right? Everybody enjoying the class so far? Fascinating stuff to learn. It gets more interesting as we go on, right? Because we'll start getting to personality, the psychological disorders, motivation, emotions, etc., etc. But for right now, we're here at thinking, language, and intelligence. How do we think? What is the process we use for thinking? How do we create shortcuts for logic, reasoning, analytical skills, how emotions affect our thinking, etc., right? All right, so we're going to learn a little bit about thinking. We're going to learn about language and thought, right? Thinking is could be deemed as useless if there's no way for you to convey information and communicate, right? Which is why language is such an important part of thought, right? So think of this concept. Do you think in English? That inner voice, speak English? And if you're bilingual, you speak Spanish and English or something, right? Or if you're multilingual, speak multi, right? Think of that, how we're making sense, even that mental voice in our head in the language that we understand and how people across the world also think according to some sort of language, some symbolism, right? And then we'll look at intelligence and its assessment. There's multiple theories on intelligence, right? Some people say there's 8, some people say there's 2 forms, some say 4, some say 12. There's all sorts of intelligence, which can be very subjective to how you view it, but we'll try to understand the basis. And then genetic and environmental influences on intelligence. Remember, in essence, you are constantly adapting to your environment, whether you like it or not, right? Whether you're conscious of it or not. Thus, if you're in an environment where certain things no longer matter or deemed useless, those things get discarded out of the mind, right? They're permanently there if they're in long-term memory, but they become sort of useless, right? So your environment does shape what's important to learn, important to think about, and what happens. Okay, cognition, right? Whenever you hear the word cognition, you are thinking about thinking, right? Cognitive abilities, right? So cognition deals with mental faculties associated with thinking, knowing, remembering, communicating, right? So we're thinking of how we think, how we communicate those thoughts, how we know what we think, and how to remember those thoughts as well too. Right? So whenever you see the word cognition, usually think of some form of thinking, like knowing it, remembering it, communicating in some way. So if someone says, hey, you have a cognitive disorder, like, oh, you got some faulty thinking, or you can't communicate your thoughts, or something like this. All right, so we start off here at concepts, right? So everything we learn as a thought usually derives as a concept first, which means that we're grouping some sort of association of things that maybe we've experienced before. So if you look at any photograph or image, you're sort of associating things and say, okay, this is that, this is that, this is what makes a full picture. This is what makes a human being. This is what makes clothing. This is what makes color and shapes. etc., right? So we conceptualize thoughts based on grouping similar objects, events, ideas, or people. And in this way, it helps us to simplify thoughts, right? Remember we say human beings like easier rather than factual. So facts are last, easy is best, which means that, hey, maybe we don't need to know all the facts. We just need to know enough to get by. Usually that's how it goes. And then we say from concepts we make prototypes. So you think of a concept car, right? Manufacturer rolls out a concept car and says, here is a concept, an idea of a car. Here's an idea of a car we have. You say, interesting, well, what's the idea look like? You're like, well, it's a prototype. Here's the prototype. We're unveiling the prototype. Prototype is a mental image or best example of the category. Right? We're unveiling what this concept looks like. A mental image. Right? So we think of prototypical things for all sorts of things, right? What's the prototype for Nike shoes? Maybe it's the Jordan 1s, Air Force 1, something. Like that's the prototypical Nike shoe, right? The first image that pops into our mind, the best representation of maybe Nike shoes would mean to us at the base level. And then we say matching new items to a prototype provides a quick and easy method for sorting items into categories. So we say we put things in their categories consciously and unconsciously, right? Think of it, bad or good, doesn't matter, we still do it, right? So on the next slide, we'll see how we do this in everyday terms. Interesting. Oh, so we conceptualize people's race, right? We conceptualize people's gender, if they look rich or poor. Hey, what's it like to look rich? What's it like to look smart? What's it like to look poor? Right? What's it like to look white male? 90% CA, Caucasian, right? 90% Asian. And we say, at what point do we no longer get the element? Right? So we say, at what point do we start to think differently about what this person is? I can't figure it out, right? And then sometimes we'll walk across other people like, oh, yeah, it's clearly black man, Hispanic female, clearly a white guy, right? And then we see other people and we're like, can't really tell. Right? Interesting. At what point? So we think based off concepts, things that you've experienced before that's been conditioned to you, right? Beaten to your brain about what's supposed to be what. Who's black, who's white, who's this and that, who's blah, 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 right? So we have these concepts, and at some point there's a blurred line, the world can no longer tell. But we have a tendency to try to derive some conclusion, to try to figure it out, because it makes life simple. We don't have time to figure out everybody's categories, right? Which means that we're usually not that factual. Right? So we tend to generalize and stereotype all the time, right? Bad or good, just a tendency for us to do because it makes life simpler for us. All right, so how do we solve problems? So we have these thoughts, and so we say life has problems. We're trying to figure things out, make meaning of things. How do we go about that, right? How do you go about figuring out the math problem, right? You never come across it, you never seen it. Like to do some engineering problem in front of you, you have no idea what the variables stand for, what the order or process to do it, and like, well, what can you do? All right, first thing you can do is the one that takes the longest. I think usually takes the longest to figure out. Let's just say trial and error. So I'm gonna keep trying to figure it out. We say after the 50th time, I figured it out. You're like, well, that's a lot of time. A lot of waste. That's inefficient. You're like, some things require trial and error because we don't have access to other information. Right? A lot of things in life we do have to figure out trial and error. And then we say which one is the most accurate. right? You want to get the most accurate results, just as you go in Google, right? TikTok, whatever, algorithm. It says step-by-step, methodical, logical procedure that guarantees solving a particular problem. Like, hey, I'm trying to do this problem. I know how to do it, but it's step-by-step. So I'm gonna follow the steps, the rule of thumb, for figuring out the problem, and I know 100% that the conclusion will be this or that. If I follow these steps, it will lead to very accurate results. You said this takes even a little bit more time. It takes less time to try and error, but it still takes time. But you're guaranteed results. And then we have heuristics, right? Heuristics is what we probably most commonly use. Simple thinking strategies that often allow efficient judgments and problem solving. In so many words, you say we use mental shortcuts. Things you learned before, put them together with other things you may know now, right? We try to draw up some conclusion to save time. Remember we say human beings have a tendency to be quick. We want quick and easy, not all the time necessarily algorithm. Right, yet it's 100% to give us the results we want, but right, still we're still gonna use heuristics. And maybe we'll gamble, 70% we're right, 30% we're wrong, but who cares? We prefer to save time rather than be accurate. So it goes to show you we prefer comfort over facts. And we'll talk about why that happens. All right, so you walk into a grocery store and you say, oh my gosh, where's the Tabasco sauce?